What's it like to be a cop in the metaverse? How about a shopkeeper in a fantasy world? What if wizards had guns? What if crabs had guns? There are a lot of video games out there, more than any one person has time to fully experience and appreciate. With time being so precious, many people favor high-profile, well-reviewed and recommended games, rather than potentially wasting their time on an unconventional experience that they may or may not connect with. Which makes sense, but it comes with the trade-off of missing some hidden gems, which is why I like to occasionally take a chance on whatever weird game happens to catch my attention. Weird is a very subjective label, of course. Any concept can be weird if you abstract it enough. But for my purposes, what I mean by that is this: games that make bold, intentional choices, either through unconventional mechanical design or aesthetic presentation. These types of games will not appeal to a broad audience, but they generally aren't meant to. They cater to a specific niche, and by narrowing their scope, they're actually given a lot more freedom to make something engaging and interesting. For a clear example of what I mean, look no further than Hypnospace Outlaw. This game is set in an alternative 1999, which will be apparent the instant that you lay eyes on the brightly colored, fuzzy web pages that make up this game's experience. The game casts you as a volunteer moderator for the Hypnospace forums. The core gameplay consists of being given a case of reported violations and then scouring the net for infractions. It is rarely crystal clear where you need to search, and resolving each case requires a fair bit of deduction. I do think that the introductory surface-level commentary that Hypnospace Outlaw offers is a little shallow. Big social media corporation bad was hardly a hot take when the game came out in 2019, much less so in 2026. But dig a little deeper, and what this game really offers is a charmingly nostalgic look at a bygone era of internet culture. The heart of the game comes from the individuals that you come to know through their web pages. These pages are dripping with personality, and it genuinely feels like each one of them was made by a real person with their own mannerisms, passions, skills, and flaws. If you're too young to have known it, this really does feel like what the early internet was like. As a child of the 90s, I remember the days before the internet was consolidated into a small handful of ubiquitous sites. I remember browsing forums and blogs with amateur graphics and unmoderated content, and a media player blasting some garbage music that I didn't like, but the creator certainly did. All of these cheesy web pages took me straight back to learning HTML so that I could set up my own page on Neopets, and with no algorithm and a whole lot less money on the table, it was so much more about passions and creativity. That's not to say that it was perfect back then. I definitely ended up in a lot of online spaces that I should not have been unsupervised, and I'm sure many millennials will remember downloading a song off of LimeWire only to hear,
"My fellow Americans."
But even so, it is an era of the internet that I think many people look back on fondly, and Hypnospace Outlaw pays tribute to the spirit of that era very well. The authenticity and humanity on display in this game is just so deeply charming. The gameplay is unconventional, and the aesthetics range from cheesy to surreal, but all of it is in service of an experience that I think really touches on something genuinely human. While we're on the subject of nostalgia, I feel like almost everybody has that game that they played and loved as a kid that it seems nobody else knows about. For me, that game is Pandemonium, a 2D platformer that I had on the PS1. This is one of those games that has a story, but almost none of it is actually in the game. When you launch the game, you are introduced to the main characters, Nikki, the acrobat, and Fargus, the jester, with his puppet Sid. The pair are firing off spells from a spellbook they stole? It's kind of unclear.
Pretty nasty, huh, Fargus? What should we name that one?
Shatner's toupee? What do you think, Sid?
So I guess William Shatner is canon in this universe? They use a spell that's too powerful for them and unleash Yungo, who eats their town. The book then shows them a map to the wishing engine to wish away Yungo, and that's the story. On to the game. This game is... It's not good. like it's not a bad game, but it is very simple. Go left, go right, jump. Occasionally you'll find a power-up that lets you shoot a spell that can defeat enemies. You can play as either of the main characters, which is fun. Nikki, as an acrobat, gets a double jump, which is incredibly good, and Fargus can, tumble, which is not remotely useful, but I always played as him anyways, because, come on, he's a jester wearing chucks. The levels are these strange, almost surreal fantasy-ish settings. Your goal is to get to the end, but if you gather 300 treasure, you'll net a bonus life, and if you collect at least 80% of the treasure in a level, you unlock a bonus game. There are 2 bonus games, which are Speed Greed, which is kind of a reflex running mini-game, and is frankly impossible to beat, and Full Tilt, which puts you inside of a giant pinball machine, and if you collect all of the treasure, you get beamed up to the top of the machine, which then blasts off into space. Insane. To Pandemonium's credit, I think it is very satisfying to nail the platforming in a level, and they do some really good work with the camera to make a 2D game feel very three-dimensional. I think the boss fights are a good time, and the music is also pretty fun. I do love this game, and revisiting it never fails to put a smile on my face. Ultimately though, I can recognize that the reason that I love this mediocre, bizarre game is pretty firmly rooted in the nostalgia that I feel for it. Pandemonium's oddness feels more incidental than intentional at times, but some games are designed with absurdity in mind. If you were on the internet in 2018, you probably remember coming across the Crab Rave music video. Well, 1 year after that song debuted and went viral on YouTube, on April Fool's Day 2019, Crab Champions was released into early access on Steam as a solo dev project by Crab Rave's creator. The premise is simple. You're a crab with a gun. Go fight. Crab Champions is really stupid, and I love it. I bought this game thinking that it would be a few minutes of fun, a good laugh, and then be forgotten. It certainly looks like that type of game with very basic animations and what looks like placeholder UI, but this is a game that absolutely knows what it is about and it fully commits itself to the bit. Despite looking frankly like a cheaply made asset flip, Crab Champions takes great pains in its design to avoid many of the pitfalls that plague a lot of roguelike games. Far too many are content to give you upgrades which make you stronger, but don't make playing the game more interesting. For example, an extra 5% damage. A roguelike lives and dies on variety, and that is where Crab Champions shines. There are a boatload of different upgrades that you can find, and only a limited number of upgrade slots to use during your run, meaning you have to pick and choose what kind of build you're going for, and what's going to complement your current weapon and or ability. For example, you might find an upgrade that makes it so your grenade also summons a turret whenever it explodes. Pair that with a perk that makes your grenade bounce and explode with every bounce, and you have the makings of a build that spams turrets across the map. Or maybe you make a build that shoots boomerang bullets or pumpkin bombs. The bottom line is, this game is just plain goofy fun. It is still in early access at time of recording, but it's still being updated with substantial content patches, so if you're a fan of games that let you completely break the experience apart, then you'll have a lot of fun with Crab Champions, and it is especially fun in co-op. If you're in the mood for a competitive game, on the other hand, Nidhogg is my go-to recommendation. This is a 2-player fencing game where the goal is to get past the other player and make it to the end of the map. Killing your opponent does not win you the round, it just gives you a couple of seconds to run before they respawn in your way again. As you can see, the design of the game is very simple, which I think actually works in the game's favor by keeping your attention on the action. You might not think that a minimalist fencing game sounds weird, but Nidhogg escalates very quickly. For example, your opponent managed to slip past you? Hurl your sword at the back of their head. You've been disarmed? No problem, simply beat your opponent to death with your bare hands and rip out their spine to replace your sword. And what's your reward for finally besting your opponent and making it to the end? Why, you get eaten by the Nidhogg, of course. The fun of Nidhogg is in the frantic pace of the back and forth scuffles that you get into, as you haphazardly try to land a blow on your opponent to buy yourself just a few precious seconds of unobstructed escape. A round may last 20 seconds, or maybe a tug of war that plays out over 5 minutes. Nidhogg is basic, but it is a tightly made, high adrenaline game that works perfectly for passing a pair of controllers around a room and having a laugh with your friends. No, 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 no! Yes! Yes!
No! We suck!
Jumping once again into the roguelike, our next game is One Step from Eden. This title wears its inspiration on its sleeve and is best described as Slay the Spire meets Mega Man Battle Network. If you aren't familiar, let me explain. The battlefield consists of 2 4x4 grids placed side by side. You occupy the left, while enemies generally occupy the right. Each character has a free attack of some sort, but your bread and butter comes from your deck of spells. The spells have a very wide range of effects, some very simple, such as lightning striking 4 tiles ahead of you, or hitting the entire back column. And some have a very high skill floor, such as teleporting yourself to the inverse square on your side, then throwing a projectile to the corresponding square on the enemy's side of the grid. This is doubtlessly the most mechanically demanding game in this video, stemming primarily from the very fast pace of its battles. You have to be quick to react to enemy attacks while also keeping track of their position so that you can hit with your spells, but keep your position in mind so that you don't get hit yourself. Do your best not to hit any hostages, but you do have to be quick if you want to open those chests, and by the way, you don't have time to look too closely at which of your spells are in hand, so you'd better be able to recognize which ones you've got through your peripheral vision and have all of their effects memorized. Or you could just make a build that spams infinite zero-cost kunai, which actually brings me to what makes One Step from Eden so compelling. If you can execute well enough, you can succeed with any build, but through savvy spell selection, strong upgrades, and the right passive artifacts, there are myriad ways to break this game wide open, practically guaranteeing a victorious run. It doesn't happen often, but when it comes together, the feeling is unmatched. The visuals in this game are clean and stylish, and the music is remarkably good too. Overall, I think that One Step from Eden is a criminally underrated and underexposed game with a lot to offer anybody who likes this type of fast-paced roguelike experience. Switching gears entirely, Princess Maker 2 is a raising simulator, which is a genre that enjoyed moderate popularity in Japan but never really got any sort of foothold outside of that market. The general idea is that you are in charge of raising a child, and the choices that you make influence the kind of person that they grow into. This particular title was developed by Gainax. Yes, the same Gainax that made such landmark anime as Neon Genesis Evangelion and Tengatopa Gurren Lagann. You play as the hero who slew a demon army. In thanks, the gods give you a 10-year-old daughter who you raise until she is 18, at which point she decides what she wants to be in life and goes off into the world. The foundation of this game is deciding on your daughter's schedule. Each month is broken up into 3 segments of 10 days each, which you schedule as you see fit. You may send her to classes, which will raise certain stats, but those classes cost money. So to earn money, maybe you send her to work, which will also impact her stats, but does have the effect of tiring her and stressing her out. So you can take a vacation, which will let her relax, but doesn't provide any stats. Or you can have her do... errantry? What is this? Oh, yeah, this game just straight up includes a JRPG adventure. It's not like the next Dragon Quest or anything, but it is fun and it adds a good level of replayability. And replayability is definitely the name of the game with this title. The game features 74 different endings, or 75 if you count letting her get sick and die. And despite what the title may imply, there is a wide variety of possible futures for her, each one with its own epilogue and with unique art. I really like the art in this game. The original dithered art is outstanding, while newer versions feature cleaner digital art. The original has a little more personality, but neither is bad in my view. I do have to address a certain elephant in the room. This is a Japanese game from 1991 about raising a daughter from the ages of 10 to 18. This game's treatment of women does not exactly conform to modern sensibilities. It never crosses the line into being exploitative or overly inappropriate, but it does reflect some very dated ideas about gender roles and beauty standards. For example, in addition to showing all of the relevant stats, the stat screen also shows your daughter's bust, waist, and hip measurements, which is, not great. More recent versions of the game have pruned away some of the more objectionable content, which I think is probably for the better. Ultimately, this game is very grounded, it's a little cozy, and it feels like the choices that you make moment to moment actually matter. It's an experience that I find very charming and very easy to lose myself in, and if the Steam reviews are any indicator, I'm not the only one who feels that way. Also occupying the same domestic fantasy anime game bubble, we have Recettear, an item shop's tale. In this title, you play as Recette, a young girl whose father disappeared, leaving her responsible for his outstanding debt. In order to pay it off, she partners with her debt collector fairy Tear to open an item store. The core gameplay of Recettear consists of stocking and decorating your store, then opening shop. When a customer wants an item, you have an opportunity to haggle, making some extra cash at the risk of driving them away. It's important to have a variety of goods on hand, as customers may request specific items. For example, a man may come out shopping because his wife is up in his shorts about getting food, so be sure to have some apples or candy on hand. You also never know when demand for a particular type of item is going to surge, letting you sell at a premium. Each week you have to pay back a higher and higher portion of your outstanding debt, maintaining a constant pressure to sell. So how do you get the items to stock your store? Customers will occasionally sell you things. You can also go to the market or to the Merchants Guild to buy stock wholesale. Or you can go to the Adventurers Guild. What is this? That's right, I got you again, sucker! It's another RPG! You can hire an adventurer to explore a dungeon with, collecting loot and leveling up. I find the regular floors to be pretty easy, but the boss fights can be genuinely quite challenging. Like any RPG, having better gear will help you prepare for these tough encounters. You can lend your adventurer better equipment, but that takes up precious limited bag space. The solution, of course, is to sell the upgrades directly to the adventurers, letting you delve deeper into the dungeon with them the next time that you go. Your roster of adventurers grows as your shop does, and as you get to know more and more characters. And the characters in this game are a delight. Recette in particular has an adorably earnest personality and carries the game through her naivety and humor. I want to shout out the localizers because clearly a lot of thought went into making jokes that would land for an English-speaking audience in this game. Taken as a whole, Recettear is a delightful and addicting experience, and it won me over through a very fun twist on a very familiar concept. It's a surprisingly deep and challenging game that feels incredibly satisfying to master, and one that I wholeheartedly recommend. Capitalism ho! Finally, we'll round off this video with an equally witty fantasy game, Tactical Breach Wizards. On the surface, this title presents itself as a fantasy XCOM. Its tactical gameplay, assortment of unique abilities and upgrades, and general design may give that impression, but the game has a few major distinctions that set it apart, a fact which the devs actually highlight in their Steam description. The clearest difference is that this game is deterministic. That is to say, there is no element of random chance. When you make a move, the outcome is clear, making Tactical Breach Wizards at its core more of a puzzle game than a strategy game. Each level sees you pursuing a main objective, with bonus side objectives for each of your characters, encouraging you to explore every possible option. And there are many. The 4 playable characters have incredibly imaginative abilities and specializations that you can explore. The best feature of the game is the inclusion of a rewind mechanic. If the choices that you make during a turn don't quite work out as you imagined, you can rewind step by step as far back as the beginning of the turn, only advancing to the next when you are confident enough to commit. This keeps the experience snappy and prevents the cascade of reloading saves that actually pulled me away from XCOM. The writing is also incredibly clever, tying funny and witty banter between the cast into a wider narrative that has a surprising level of depth and authenticity. I also think that the design of the world and the game is fantastic. Urban fantasy is hard to pull off, but I think this game strikes the perfect balance between being recognizably modern and having a clear magical flourish. This game really flew under the general radar, as did all of the games that I've discussed. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. These games are weird. They stand out, and though they may not appeal to the majority of players, every one of them is somebody's favorite game. I hope I've introduced you to a game that you'll love, or at least one that piques your interest enough to take a chance on a new, weird experience. If you do try any of these, or if you have any recommendations for other good offbeat games, please leave a comment. I would love to hear your thoughts. Thank you very much to my patrons. You guys make projects like this possible. I hope that you have a great day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!